Welcome back. In this lesson, we are going to continue investigating with a zero product property to make sure that we really hit it hard, because this is a concept that's going to keep coming back throughout Algebra 2. So the key to the zero product property is always remember factor and then set both parentheses equal to 0 in order to solve. So let's factor this. So x squared comes from x and x. Negative 15 can come from 1 and 15 or 3 and 5. However, don't forget that that is actually a negative 15. So to be a negative 15, remember we're saying 1 is positive, 1 is negative. So in order to get a positive 2, what that means is we're going to need that 3 to be negative, the 5 to be positive, because negative 3x plus 5x does give us a positive 2x. And when we do that, now that means that we're ready to apply the zero product property. So I'm going to take each piece and say that it can equal 0. So x could be 3, because that'll set the first piece equal to 0. Or the second piece, meaning x could also be negative 5 to make the second piece 0, also making the whole thing 0. And again, we can keep applying the same thing, keep using the same thing. So let's apply it here. The x squared comes from x and x. That 6 could come from 1 and 6 or from 2 and 3. But the thing I'm noticing is it's adding to be a negative 5. Well, for two things to be, or to multiply to be positive and add to be negative, it means you have to be dealing with two negative things. So that means we're going to have a negative 2 and a negative 3, because negative 2x plus negative 3x is going to give us that negative 5x that we're looking for. And then take each piece and set it equal to 0. So x equaling 2 will make that first piece 0, making the whole thing 0. Or the second piece, if x were 3, would make everything become 0. So that really was a review from the previous notes, but I also want to show you even in our more complicated factoring problems, it is still completely doable. And when I say more complicated, I mean those cases where a is not 1. So for example, that 2x squared, in order to get a 2x squared, that means we're going to have 2x and an x. That 5 there is coming from 1 and 5. So that means we just have to be careful that we're putting these in the right way. Well, I'm going to do 1 and 5 first, and then I'm going to check my connections. So that gives me a 1x and a 10x, which does give me the 11x that I'm looking for. So I did set up that factoring correctly. And now that means I can finish my problem. So I take that 2x plus 1, take that first parenthesis, set it equal to 0. Now in this one, there's going to be a little bit of solving to do. I do need to subtract 1 from both sides and then divide by 2. So my first one is negative 1/2. So my second one is that easier case that you're probably even seeing a shortcut for by now. The x of negative 5 would make that second piece equal to 0. And our final example of this note. To get 3x squared in the beginning, that means I'm going to need a 3x and an x. Now to get 2, I need a 1 and a 2. But to multiply it to be negative, it means I need a positive and a negative. All right, so This is going to take some guess and check work, okay? So just to remind you what that guessing and checking looks like, is if we think it's going to be 1 and 2, well, let's see what those connections give us. That gives us a 1x and a 6x. Well, if I know one of those need to be negative, if that 1x were negative, that would give me a 5x. Or if the 6x were negative, that would give me a negative 5x. Neither one of those is what I want. Neither of those are that 1x that I'm looking for. So that's telling me that that's not going to work. I don't want the 1 and the 2 set up that way. So what that's telling me is I must need it this way. So let's see what happens here. I have a 2x and a 3x. So in order to get a positive 1x, it's the 2x that's going to need to be negative, because 3x minus 2x is my 1x. So what that means is that negative has to carry over here, and that one has to be positive. All right, so once you settle that factoring business, now you can finish solving the problem. So now you can take your first piece, set it equal to 0. And again, here we have a little bit more solving to do. We have to add the 2 over and divide by 3. And the second one is our more basic one. If x plus 1 has to be 0, then x has to be negative 1. All right, again, please make sure you're asking if you need any help on this. Make sure you have it all written down, and I'll see you in the next video.